So let's talk about a huge shift in how one of the world's biggest welfare systems works. We're going to dive into how the relationship between a citizen and their government has changed, moving from this idea of welfare as something you have a right to welfare as something you receive, almost like a gift. It's a fascinating story. At the heart of all this is a really tough question that pretty much any government could face, right? When the economy slows down, when jobs are hard to find, what do you do? What's the right call? This is the fundamental choice that kicks everything off. Okay, so you've got two basic paths you can take. Path A is all about fixing the engine of the economy, trying to create jobs, boost industries, really focus on that long-term growth. Path B is more about managing the immediate fallout, the human cost. It's about putting a safety net in place to help people get by. Now, the analysis we're looking at argues that India went hard down Path B. To really get why that choice is such a big deal, we have to look at what the welfare system was like before this all happened, because it was built on a totally different idea. This is really a tale of two completely different philosophies of welfare. So for a long time, especially after the year 2000, India's welfare system was all about legal rights. The whole idea was that benefits weren't charity. No, they were entitlements written into law. This was huge because it meant citizens could actually demand services. They could question how things were being done, and they could even sue the government if they weren't getting what they were legally owed. It was all about empowering the citizens. But then, things started to change. A new way of thinking emerged, and with it, a new identity for the person getting help. The active citizen, who had rights, started to be seen more as a passive beneficiary, or in Hindi, a labharthi. And wow, when you put these two models side by side, the difference is it's night and day. You go from the citizen, who has an entitlement and makes a demand, leading to empowerment, and you shift to the beneficiary, who feels gratitude for the receipt of a benefit, which is seen as a form of compensation. It's a total flip in the dynamic. And that brings us to this really important word, labharthi. I mean, literally, it just means beneficiary. But in this new political world, it's come to mean something more specific. It describes a citizen whose main connection to the government is through receiving these benefits, which are presented as a direct delivery, not as a right that they can claim. So you might be wondering, how did this massive shift actually happen on the ground? Well, the engine behind it all was a tech-heavy system called Direct Benefit Transfer, or DBT for short. Now, we have to be clear here. The analysis points out that DBT was a legitimate step forward in many ways. It really did cut down on corruption and leaks in the system. It got rid of all those ghost beneficiaries who didn't actually exist. And it made getting money and services to people way faster and more efficient. These were real, positive administrative gains. But there was a flip side, a political cost. By creating this direct pipeline from the central government to the individual, DBT basically cut out all the middlemen, local governments, community groups, unions. This made it harder for citizens to organize and negotiate for more, and it created this super strong direct link between each person and a national leadership. Accountability wasn't local anymore. It all pointed straight to the top. And this leads to another really, really critical point the analysis makes. See, there's a massive gap between giving someone access to something and them actually being able to use it. So in this new system, how was success measured? Well, it was all about the numbers you could easily count. The government could say, look, we opened this many bank accounts. We installed this many gas connections. We enrolled this many people in a program. The focus was all on the delivery, on giving people access. But the reality for people, that was all about usage. I mean, what's the point of a gas connection if you can't afford the next cylinder? Or a bank account if you don't have a steady income to save? Things like cost and just the daily struggle to get by meant that for a lot of people, actually using these benefits over the long term was tough. So where does all this lead? What's the bigger picture here? Well, the analysis argues that it creates this kind of balance, this equilibrium, where people are surviving but not necessarily moving forward. This quote from the source material just hits the nail on the head. The new welfare system got really good at stopping the absolute worst from happening. It was a lifeline. It kept people afloat. But it didn't necessarily teach them how to swim to shore. It was managing poverty, not creating a path out of it. And this leads to what the analysis calls political anesthesia. Think about it like this. If the welfare system is just good enough to take the edge off the worst economic pain, it can actually lower the public's demand for bigger, harder, more fundamental reforms, like creating millions of good, stable jobs. The urgency just kind of fades away. And that's the long-term trap. Once a huge chunk of the population is relying on these benefits just to get by, it becomes incredibly difficult, politically speaking, for any government to ever scale them back or change course. The whole system just locks itself into place. So, everything we've talked about, it all builds up to one big, fundamental question about what a safety net is even for. The entire debate really boils down to this choice right here. Is the goal of welfare just to help people endure a bad situation, to help them hang on, or is the goal to help people advance, to give them the tools to climb the ladder and maybe one day not need the safety net at all? The analysis we've looked at concludes that the Labharthi state is built for endurance, not advance. And that leaves us with this final question, and it's a question that could apply to any country, really. When we build these social safety nets, what's the ultimate point? Is it just to stop people from falling, or is it to give them a platform to climb higher? Thanks for joining us for this explainer.